So we are carrying on with the 2023 KGEF. Session 3 will be on United in Care, eradicating concerns through social support. We heard a lot of great presentations and comments made in the second session. I'm sure that this third session will be likewise informative. I also gained a lot and realized a lot during my paternity leave. And I hope that more people can join in with me in feeling these experiences through parental leave and child care. I think that the third session will give us some insights in this area. I will also personally be listening very carefully throughout this session. I would now like to turn over the mic to our moderator.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am In-sill, moderator for Session 3. I am president of the Korean Peninsula Population Institute for Future. Last year, I was a keynote speaker for KGEF 2022. This year, we have this topic of coexistence of work and care responsibilities. Now, work session is over, and we will talk about care this time for session 3. I think it has been a long day, but since this is the last session or last session with presentations, please bear with us until the end and give your full attention. In session 3, we will talk about United in Care. Let me first introduce our speakers. The first presentation will be delivered by Kim In-kyung, Senior Director, Department of Public Finance and Social Policy of KDI. Dr. Kim In-kyung received doctoral degree at Texas Austin University and in child care, early education, family policies are the areas of her expertise. And right now, she is also working as advisor to Low Fertility Rate Aging Society Committee for President. The first session is about child education and care, and second presentation is about elderly care, the role of women in elderly care. Under this topic, Yong-ho, Professor Yong-ho from Incheon National University, will give us a presentation. He received his doctoral degree from York University, and he is the communication specialist in the various government institutes. And right now, he is working as advisor who is working on the long-term care service improvement committee under the government. And I am also joined by two panelists. The first panelist is Choi Yoon-kyung, head director of the Office of Planning Coordination. She studied child family studies in Missouri University of the U.S. Child care service are her areas of expertise, and the child care price index, a standard development model, and more recently, she studied this integrated model for child care and the child care restructuring for post-COVID era are the two research topics. And on her next, we have Seo Dong-min, Associate Professor of Baekseok University from the Health Graduate School of Health of Seoul National University. He studied this topic, elderly care, elderly welfare, long-term care are his areas of expertise. And up until now, he has been giving lectures on the social security policies, and he is doing multiple research projects on elderly care and long-term care. We'd like to first start with the presentation by Senior Director Kim In-kyung.
Hello everyone, I am In-kyung Kim from KDI. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at this very important 2023 Korea Gender Equality Forum. I understand that gender equality enhancement is an effective way to improve on our low fertility rate. And we need to have a care service for our children, for women to continue to pursue their careers. And this will also lead to gender equality and to overcome the low fertility rate. So I would like to discuss with you childhood education and care. So my presentation will be in the following order: South Korea's low fertility rate, trends and underlying factors. Then I'm going to be talking about childhood education and care by age group. And then I'm going to be talking about strategies to improve CEC. In 2005, we established the Framework Act on Low Birth Rate in an Aging Society. At the time, our fertility rate was much higher than what it is now, and we see that it went up and down, and then from 2015 onward, it is on a steep decline. In 2022, the number of annual childbirth is 250,000, and it is less than zero point 0.8. OECD average is 1.6, so it is less than half. The reason for Korea's low fertility rate can be due to various factors, such as high housing costs, weak confidence in public education, and intense competition and inadequate support for childbirth, and also doubts about parenting aptitude. OECD country citizens carried out a survey on whether they had friends or relatives that could extend a helping hand in difficulties. Out of the 37 countries surveyed, Korea was ranked as 36, and there is a low satisfaction rate about raising children when women are at a crossroad of having to choose between their career pursuit and raising children. So I'm going to talk about this last part. So this is the categorization by age group of CEC programs. You can send your children when they're in their infancies, daycare centers, and then kindergarten. During elementary school, you can use the after-school care classes, and you can use this service even when they are in the kindergarten. When they go on to elementary school, there's the elementary after-school care classes and community child care center and after-school academy for youths. So by type, I wanted to talk about the current status and ways to increase the quality. For daycare center and kindergarten, there's a lot of differences. We are in the process of integrating daycare centers and kindergarten, but there's a difference in the age bracket. Also, we see a difference in the relevant ministry. It's going to be integrated to the supervision of a Ministry of Education in the future. There's also differences in the teacher's expertise, institutional operational transparency, parents' trust in the institution's quality, and operational autonomy. So we are in the process of integrating daycare center and kindergarten in order to have the same level of care for this age bracket. Children, when they select the institutions that they will be attending, it is based on the decisions of their parents, and due to the distance from their homes and their workplaces, they are restricted in the choices that they can make. Also, even if the institutions are transparent in their operation, parents are not professionals in this area compared to the teachers. So there is limited information that they can rely on, which is why it is extremely important for the government to provide information. If there is more transparency in the operation and also information provided, then the trust level will increase, and this will have an impact on the operation. So this will lead to a virtuous cycle. So going on to the items, we can think about the teacher's expertise for qualification and teacher training. Uh, we need to work with various professionals, and they should work on enhancing teachers' skills. We need to think about the qualifications. Next, the qualifications and assignment of teachers should be restructured to ensure consistent quality in early childhood education and childcare throughout the institution's service hours. Compensation and operation is related to the cooperation that is required by the teachers. This is slightly different from the qualifications of teachers. This is related more to the hygiene, and this is an area that needs to be supervised by external organizations, and we need to enhance overall qualifications, and we can hold surveys and disclose this information by providing more information. The parents, if they can get professional suggestions and advice from the teachers, then the teachers can be role models. In the case of Finland, by individual children, they have different development plans. If we can reduce the teacher to children ratio, the parents and the teachers can together create a plan for the development of children. For the autonomy of the institution, there should be cooperation among teachers and external teachers. Next, on the childcare services. The childcare services include daycare centers, and this aims to bridge the gap in facility-based care by providing temporary and emergency hourly care services. And from 2010, there is the preference for infants aged 3 to 36 months, and a full daycare childcare service can be provided at their residence. We heard the announcement of steps to enhance the childcare services. I understand that the childcare service, in terms of quantity, will be increased and the quality will be increased. There will be more public services provided, and there will be a registration system. There will be a development of a private-public care integration training. So the parents can be relieved from the burden of child care. In the case of child care service, through the implementation of ECEC integration, the quality of child education and care in daycare centers and kindergartens should be elevated, ensuring its discernibility by the parents. In training, the teachers, we need to have a training of 3 years, which is hardly being argued. And you, even if you are qualified and get the qualifications, it's very broad from 0 to 12 years old. In the case of child care service, we should carry out more services in the child care services area. Next, in the the private sector, child care providers, we can permit the use of government vouchers if they meet certain eligibility criteria. Right now, according to the enhanced plan, they say that there will be a registration method, but we can think about a policy in which we permit more organizations to use the government voucher. Recently, we see a all-day infant care service in participation with the child development centers. They provide like evaluation of on-child development monitoring. So for the infants, sometimes the parents may not understand development assessment. So we will be expanding online development assessments nationwide, and we will strengthen development by different phases of the child care. And the teachers and caregivers and therapists, as they communicate with one another, they can carry out development assessment and treatment methodologies so that the children can be back on track on their development path. Going on to the elementary after-school program, which is the last area of KICCE, just like kindergarten and daycare centers, we see that there is a big discrepancy and difference in after-school program for elementary school students. There are various programs such as community after-school centers, regional centers for children, after-school academy for youth. There are differences in the ministries and organizations. There's a difference in the financial burden and the time that is provided. The elementary school after-school program is an service that parents rely on greatly because it is covered in the school. But there isn't a lot of spots for this. And the after-school academy for youths, it's mostly on this special like recreational programs, but compared to the other types of services, it is more like leisure oriented. In all of the elementary after school programs, there should be an equal level of quality. Elementary school students compared to the infants and lower grade children, yet we see that the distance is an important issue from their homes. That is why it is mostly centered around elementary schools, and they have to think about the private institutions' distance too. There should be a certain quality level and standard. Of course, there needs to be a social consensus on what that threshold and standard will be. Also, some institutions may be very high in quality, but we should not have too much of a difference in the gap. We can think about the difference of Ministry of Education and the local governments. The Ministry of Education, you can take advantage of their expertise in education to provide training programs, and the municipal governments can be responsible for administrative activities to identify the needs for child care and to receive applications, allocating the children to the programs, and also providing logistics for the children to go to those child care locations in a safe manner. So the programs that I talked about, such as elementary after-school program, we need to reduce the quality gap, as I said. And in this sense, I wanted to introduce to you Sweden's Leisure Time Center. It is after-school childcare, and there is a curriculum for this leisure time center. There is the primary school and a preschool class. So you have to attend a preschool class before you go on to primary school. And the curriculum for the Leisure Time Center, preschool classes, and primary classes are integrated with one another for there to be organic and unified curriculums to provide education at the right time. Furthermore, the children depending on their needs, interests, and situations, they can select the preschool classes and primary school classes that can supplement their activities. For example, at school, it's more theoretic study, but in LTC, they can see how those theories are implemented in actual society, which leads to improvement in their hands-on skills, and they are able to express themselves. They can increase their social capacity by interacting with teachers and other students. At LTC, they can obtain abilities in problem solving, and emotional skills can be enhanced through these programs. That is why in Korea, in our primary child care service, we should implement an integrated program like this, encompassing social skills too. So from infancy to elementary school, I talked about Korea's care system and ways to make qualitative improvements. And that is all for my presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much. We will go on to Professor Chun Young-ho's presentation.
Well, as it was introduced, my name is Chon Yong-ho. I'm from Incheon National University. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So the topic of my presentation is the role of women in elderly care. As you well know, elderly care is divided into formal elderly care and informal elderly care. Formal care is care services provided by the public institutes and the public programs. Qualified and certified care service workers visit homes or nursing homes to provide services, and informal care services include care works provided by other family members, especially female family members, such as daughters. So in elderly care, we can talk about formal and informal elder care services. We will first look at current status of elderly care, and what is most important here is how to ensure people who will provide care services. The quality of services will be determined by the workforce or those people who provide such services. Right now, females are taking on the burden in a disproportionate manner, and this is creating various social challenges. First, formal elder care services in Korea. Generally, when we talk about elderly care, we are targeting senior citizens aged 65 years or older. Most of these people are suffering from chronic diseases like diabetes, and we have to help them maintain their health and manage their health status to extend their healthier lives. So healthcare and welfare social security services have been designed to assist daily lives of these people. And on the left column, you can see the services provided by National Health Insurance Services. We provide primary, secondary, tertiary healthcare services under the National Health Insurance Services, and in the clinics, public clinics across this country, we provide welfare and health management services, and we especially offer visiting nurse services for mentally challenged people, people with dementia, and people with other chronic diseases. So nurses are mostly dispatched to provide such visiting services. When the COVID pandemic was prolonged, people suffering from mental illnesses received help from mental health centers across the country, and especially the seniors suffering from dementia. About 70% of the senior citizens are suffering from dementia, so we have dementia supporting centers across the country to provide assisting services for these people. And I think you have heard of long-term care services. And long-term care services will be provided to those who have difficulties in maintaining their daily lives. So we have visiting care, visiting bath, visiting nurse services. And when these people have more difficulties, they move from their homes to go to nursing homes. And on the right side, you can see the social care services, which will be provided to senior citizens for their logistics or daily lives. And there is also customized care programs for senior citizens. It is for those who cannot use long-term care service. And there's also emergency safety alarm service for older people when they live alone, and sometimes they die and no one can find out about that, and that they are discovered way after their death. So we install sensors to create some networks, so if there is no detection in those sensors, which will set off an alarm, and our public service workers will visit those homes. And today I will just talk about focusing on long-term care services, social care services, those parts written in blue color. There are social care services in Korea, and among them we have long-term care services and the customized social care services. As you can see, long-term care service, regardless of their income level, if they have some difficulties in how to receive long-term care, they have to receive these services. But top 30% of the income brackets, they cannot use these services. But if they are in the top 70%, they can use long-term care services. Alarm services or home assistance services are also provided for those who have difficulties in mobility. Since long-term care services are well extended and expanded, and 70% of all senior citizens are using, so this program is expanded very fast in a relatively short period of time, and it has emerged as one of the flagship programs for the elderly in Korea. And the Moon Jae administration, there has been huge improvement for care services for the elderly, and there were various pilot programs where senior citizens can spend the rest of their lives at their homes while using community infrastructure rather than just being hospitalized in the care hospitals or nursing homes. And the local authorities also provide care services. In Incheon and Hwasong, for example, they had pilot programs for better visiting home services. If senior citizens have difficulties in mobility, there are about 200,000 elderly people who have mobility difficulty. Then doctors will just out. As part of outreach program, doctors will visit the homes of these senior citizens to provide the health care services. Then what about workers who provide such services for our senior citizens? As was mentioned before, we have long-term care service programs and tailored care services for the elderly people. And 15% of the elderly population of Korea are using either of these programs. And the number of recipients is also increasing, which has increased the demand for the labor supply, and especially the long-term care insurance. As of this year, there are care service workers, like about 630,000 people, and the number is increasing rapidly by 50 to 60,000 people per year, and 86% of these service workers provide visiting home services. and the tailored elderly care services like visiting homes and providing assisting services. There are cares life care service workers. These workers, most of them are females. They provide nursing care services, and 93% of care service workers are women. Therefore, the care services are very labor intensive and physically taxing, but most of them are females and they are very important assets in this labor sector. And they are replacing the roles once played by other family members. Even though they belong to a former sector, but these care service workers face various challenges. Many care service workers they are abused sexually by male elderly people and the female elderly people who are suffering from dementia. They are verbally abused and sometimes physically abused. They have many difficulties. Therefore, care service workers, when they are exposed to such risks, even though the frequency is low, the mental damage is huge, so they just quit their jobs after an unfortunate incident. So this is one of the major challenges that we have to solve to enhance welfare of these care service workers. We have to also think about whether these are quality and decent jobs for people. To ensure sustainability of care services, we need to have more quality jobs to guarantee sustainability, life security, and the satisfaction of workers. But as you well know, most of these jobs are not so secure, and especially when care service workers, when they have to visit homes, they are not guaranteed a fixed work hours, and sometimes they are not guaranteed a fixed income because their work hours vary depending on situations. Therefore, 80% of these workers are irregular or part-time workers, and especially if they provide home visiting services, there are so many other care service workers in the cities. They are in severe competition, so they cannot be guaranteed a job security where they can provide quality services for the elderly people. And on the other hand, care service workers at the public institutions, their workload is too high. They work in shifts and sometimes they have to work overnight. The intensity is so high. Sometimes one care service worker has to take care of 10 patients. So if you look at the age and the income level, the monthly salary is 1.28 million Korean won, or 1.67 million won for public institution. Even though the work intensity and workload is so high, they are not guaranteed a very secure income. If you look at the average salary of Korean workers, these care service workers are not paid well relatively. Therefore, relatively younger people in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, they are not reluctant to work as care service workers. So the average age of these workers is being raised to become senior citizens themselves. So in those in their 50s or even in their 70s are working as care service workers, and the average age of care service workers is going up, worsening the labor shortage trend. And especially if you go to the countryside outside Seoul, it becomes extremely difficult to secure younger care service workers, and this is widening the gap, the labor shortage, worsening the labor shortage on the supply side. So by 2027, there will be a shortage of 110,000 people in the care service industry, since the aging is gaining pace, but we are not securing enough manpower, and this will just worsen the gap in the care services, and this should be viewed as another form of the abuse, physical abuse of the elderly people. Now, let me move on to the informal sector, informal care service. These are care services provided by other family members. Formal care service is important, but if you look at the reality, then the informal care services account for the majority part of the care services. And this responsibility is mainly borne by female family members, and the imbalance is so severe. Those in their 40s, 50s, when they take care of their parents, usually wives take on the role, and they cannot be economically active because of the burden, and sometimes they feel so stressed because of the responsibility. And as of these days, the daughters replace the daughter-in-laws to become primary caregiver for their elderly parents, leading to a lowered quality of life for these daughters. So the caregivers, as when it comes to caregiver roles, women are at huge disadvantage. So the elderly people are not usually taken care of by their sons. Most of the caregivers are females. 98.3% of the male elderly people are taken care of by their spouse. But if you look at the opposite side, only a few female senior citizens are taken care of by their spouses. Uh, and I think if we look at the social trend, then less children are taking care of their older parents, and we have this weakened social responsibility for taking care of their parents. So the elderly people for future generations, they are less likely to be taken care of by their sons or daughters. This means that the long-term care services and the former care services will become more important, but we do not have enough budget for that. We have to think about the implication of having less children taking care of their parents. Therefore, we have to allocate more budget in the former long-term elderly care service sector, and we believe that there will be an increase in the budget spending. Right now, the elderly people who need care services, they are receiving the care from their children or other family members. And you can see that the elderly people aged 75 or older, most of them are being taken care of by their children, and they are taken care of by their children or their spouse. And if they become older, like older than 75 years old, then the role of a spouse increases, but the actual help comes from their children. And when the long-term care services and former care services, these services become more important for the elderly people. And one of the points that we have to pay attention is the shortfall or the deficit, the gap we are not filling. Among the senior citizens aged 75 years older, they need care services, but those care services are not provided from the formal sector or informal sector as well. 30% of these elderly people are not getting sufficient care services even though they need them. And whether their caregiver lives nearby or far from their home, this is another factor that can determine the care services. If their children live in Seoul, but the parents live in the countryside outside Seoul, then this spouse becomes the primary caregiver instead of their children, and their children rank just the third when it comes to providing care services. They just make phone calls now and then. So if the parents live far away from their children, and if their children cannot provide care services for their old parents, then these old people cannot get enough care services, even though they are in a dire need of care services. This is a very unfortunate reality of Korea. We do not have a quality work environment for care service workers. This makes it more difficult for us to secure enough supply of labor. And because since we have more participation of women in the labor market and we have less children taking care of their parents, if we think about all these different trends, then the only conclusion we can draw is that we have to reinforce our public institution, public programs for care services by expanding former care service industry. And one way to do that is to increase our spending for care service workers. About 86% of the healthcare fee reimbursement has to be spent by our national health insurance plan. And this is a very good policy that the government has to support the larger part of the salary paid to care service workers. But if you look at the reality, this is not the case. Even though this is very important to care services, there's no public system or framework where the government can support the salaries paid to care service workers. In advanced economies, there is a cash allowance for care service workers, health checkup, counseling service. There are various benefit programs for the informal care service workers or informal caregivers. This is to give social support to work as a social safety net for people who provide care services to their family members. One case and example is the holiday service for the care services. Taking care of a family member who's suffering from dementia can be physically and mentally taxing and exhausting, but we are not providing enough support for these family members who are taking care of dementia patients. We have to give at least 1 week or 2 weeks of leave to these family members, even though we have a program in names, but these programs are not being utilized by people. Only 800 people have used these programs up until now. This is a very unfortunate fact. So the awareness is low and the actual utilization of those programs is also low. So in the former care service sector, most of the workers are females, and in the informal sector as well, daughters instead of sons are providing primary caregiving services to their parents. Despite that, the government is not giving enough support for these workers. They are just labeling this as the natural responsibility of children and is not giving enough rewards to these people. There are many government welfare services for young people or those or middle-aged people, but care services for various demographic uh, groups are also provided by women. Despite that, the women are not being recognized for their contribution to care services. And as I mentioned, 40% of senior citizens who live far away from their children are not getting enough care services, and this will aggravate the social issue of senior citizens living alone. So what is important here is to providing quality care services to our elderly people. We have to expand the public care services by spending more for building infrastructure. Even though we have visiting home services, there are senior citizens who have to be hospitalized and or have to be taken to nursing homes. So we need to have more nursing homes and hospitals for elderly people, and there should be some social safety net for people recognizing the roles of family members who provide care services for their parents, and that the cash benefits and or other allowances should be given to informal workers. Community-based family centers also be a channel to provide training and support for those who provide informal care services for their family members. This is it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to start discussion.
Please begin. Thank you very much for the two presentations. So we are living in an era of care, and care policies have developed to a certain state. We saw the performance results of care, and there were some areas that we neglected, and we also have some priorities that we need to think about. So this is the area that I wanted to discuss. We saw in the area of child care, we see that this child care is connected to education and lifelong learning, and it is the same for elderly care. It is connected to health, and this is also related to child care too. So care service is being expanded. So what are the policies that we need to consider to have expanded concept of care? First, in the first presentation, in the KICCE, we saw the different types of care service by child age, such as the daycare services and kindergartens. And as this is integrated, we realize the importance of enhancing quality. And we also heard about capacity and professionalism of the teachers. We need to improve the treatment that they receive, and importance of organization culture, and importance of enhancing transparency in these institutions operation, and that there should be openness of these institutions so that teachers and parents can cooperate with one another. And we also heard about the autonomy of the curriculum of the teachers. For public education, we always stress the importance of consistency and standardizing the curriculum, but we were not able to discuss the autonomy of the teachers. Yet we heard about the importance of enhancing quality by providing autonomy to the teachers, and on the operation time, and we heard about the costs associated for the parents. And second, through the enhancement of the child care enhancement plan, we heard about that, which was announced by the Ministry of Gender Equality. We should expand child care from the public sector to the private sector. There can be ways to expand infrastructure, and we also can improve the quality of the infrastructure. Also, we should connect organically the residential child care service. And the Center for Development of Children was opened recently, and for those who make applications through the daycare centers, they can receive a development assessment. So this is a monitoring of children, and parents and children's needs for this is great these days. We see a surge in the applications for this. We will need more systematic and professional approach for this. Third, we heard about the after-school programs for elementary school students. There are many types of after-school care, and It is run by different agencies, such as the Ministry of Education and the municipal governments. There should be integration there. We should eliminate gaps in the care. There are many types of care provided, but it should be integrated with one another, which is a challenge that needs to be overcome. As was discussed, we need to have a integrated and standardized operation policy. The after school elementary programs, we say that it is a multiple ministry agenda. So this is a discussion from the provider's perspective for the children and parents. It is something that needs to be provided continuously. There should be there is still the challenges of continuity and consistency and transition. We need to connect this with other services. The after school programs provided by elementary schools, it can be integrated with the daycare and kindergarten integration service. We heard next about the elderly care. We should allow those with qualifications to want to enter into this ecosystem, and we should enhance their confidence in this area. And recently, this has become a society issue of the teachers' rights being undermined, and this seems to be because the roles and responsibilities of care is not supported in detail, and there wasn't a discussion about the roles and responsibilities. So for us to have a society of shared caring, we should set up clear scopes and boundaries on the roles and responsibilities of teachers. And we are at a time point in which we need to discuss this, and the care ecosystem requires the participation of parents and support of parents too. The community and parents should not just be those that purchase the service, and they are not the consumers or the supervisors of the service. The care is a encompassing scope that can be expanded. We should all participate in this ecosystem. You should bear not only you should not just enjoy the privileges, but should bear the responsibility.
And about the second presentation, I think one of the reasons that we have low fertility rate is because of the gender inequality in the elderly care. And it gave us painted the reality picture with the statistics. Right now, the supply and the labor supply in elderly care is falling down, and we have to look ahead to the implications of these falling statistics. The number of children is declining, and the demand for the care service is increasing, and there's a mismatch between the supply and demand. And to address this issue, we need to come up with a comprehensive policy package that can enhance the quality of care services. The care service workers for the elderly care and the infrastructure development and maintenance, they have to be all advanced to meet the demands, increasing demands of the elderly care. Right now, if we look at the social security services, then we have very diverse policies and programs. And in elderly care, we have diversity in terms of policy, and this should be replicated in childcare as well. When I look at the two common issues in these two presentations of very different topics, is that as the demand for elderly care increases and demand for childcare decreases, even though despite the difference, there is also this very serious issue of the mismatch between supply and demand. To address these issues, we need to secure a better infrastructure and more service workers by providing better working environment. And especially, we need to increase the quality of labor force by providing more enabling environment and providing more quality jobs to meet the demands of this increasing elderly care services. And we need to have a very interdisciplinary or integrated approach support to overcome these issues. Since the program is operated by multiple government departments, it is very difficult to coordinate and integrate approaches of different departments and governments. However, we need to have a community-based and local authority-based approach to find out the right solution. So the healthcare, security, safety, welfare issues of the elderly people. All of these issues have to be considered in care services to meet the demands. The elderly care services have to be specialized, diversified, and tailored. To make this possible, there should be some accreditation programs along with many support programs to enhance the quality of labor. Since there are much diversified demands and needs for elderly care, we need to structure elderly care services provided by the informal and the formal sectors. So we have to take a look at how these programs will evolve based on very in-depth analysis and diagnosis, and especially for children, when children have some developmental challenges, then we have to also consider these developmental challenges when we design our care services for children. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Professor So, as was introduced, I am Dongmin So from Baekseok University. I want to talk about the role of women in elderly care.
So let me first take a look at elderly care, the aging society, and the rapidly increasing need for elderly care. As was mentioned, the Korean government has expanded the scope and breadth of the elderly care programs provided by the formal sector. So we have more programs in place, but in the process, there are many challenges and rooms of improvement. While introducing these programs, we failed to connect the theory with practice, and some programs, even though they exist, they are not fully utilized, creating blind spots and creating those who are neglected, even though we have programs in place. So to improve elderly care, we have introduced various pilot programs. Those pilot programs have been introduced by the local authorities, and we have to wait and see what kind of impact will be created by those pilot programs. I think these programs are very pioneering, and this will help us build a social consensus within Korea. And next, I also want to mention former care service workers or care service workers in the former sector. We just focused on how to increase the beneficiaries of our care service programs, but we didn't pay enough attention to suppliers of these care services, and we don't have enough support for these care service workers. As was mentioned in the presentation, for the care services, the collaboration between formal and informal sectors is really important, and we have to look at this from the perspective of women. In care services, providers are primarily women, and this has created stereotypes and bias against women. And we think that if we have more programs, then the primary beneficiaries are women, and this can serve as barriers when women try to participate in a labor market. The primary care service providers are women, and this created the stereotypes about women. And this has led to lower wages and worse working environment for women, and this poor working environment has been reinforced by the support programs. The female care service workers, they're exposed to various hazards and risks like sexual abuse or verbal abuse. And this has worsened the supply and demand mismatch in the care service market. Therefore, if we want to increase the former care service workers, we have to recognize the importance of labor provided by these people. It has been very long since the family members had excessive demands for the care service workers. We didn't invest enough time and resources to help out these care service workers. Next issue is about informal care service workers. Well, these services, informal services, are usually provided by their daughters. In informal providers, if the care burden is limited on just the one person, the stress level can go up. The burden can be too excessive, psychological burden can be too much, and sometimes these people are deprived of a social identity because they are isolated from social life. And this is another factor that creates a very poor environment for informal workers. If daughters, if they become primary care service provider, caregiver, they do not have enough time to go out and hang out with their friends, and their social interaction will be reduced. They will have less time to meet with colleagues or friends. So their social relationships are all disconnected, and all the single identity they put on is caregiver for all their parents, and this is not sustainable. So we have to think about the situation they face. Female family members, they feel like they have more burden, and because of that, they are at worse health. Their health is not in a good condition, and they have to spend more of their time taking care of other family members. Therefore, they are exposed to the heightened risk of developing depression and other mental illnesses. And what about male family members? Male family members, they have to also look back on themselves when they're taking on the caregiving roles. They just focus on their identity outside homes, and they do not think that the caregiving is not their responsibility. So, as was mentioned in the presentations, when we have this discussion on the informal care service, we have to think about the division of roles and responsibilities within our families. Now, these days, more senior citizens are living alone, and assisting them to have quality life while living alone is really important. But these days, these people are just taken care of by their spouses or their daughters. And we have this aging society, and the senior citizens have extended a lifespan. And when they spend later days of their life, then if the male senior citizens develop diseases, who will be the primary caregiver? Their spouses, their wives. So even though there have been some efforts, the primary caregivers are wives or the female family members. So we need to support these people, and this should just go beyond creating better working environment. We have to think about whether this situation is sustainable. Just relying on other spouses or daughters for caregiving services would not be sustainable. So we need to have more community-based support, and we need to have more centers across the country to give support to these primary caregivers.
I would like to thank the ambassador from Canada, Tamara Mohini. I don't know if she is here with us right now. I was a visiting professor that went to Canada during COVID. Thank you for allowing me to visit Canada at that time. Uh, so, gender equality, I think it can be different by the area and the community, and I could feel what life and family balance was when I was there, and I felt how families and communities can be changed by gender equality policies. Although my stay in Canada was short, I could really feel the difference. It was challenging work to mow the lawn at the time when I was in Canada, but it was an enjoyable time that I spent there, and I hope that this culture can lay root in Korea too. With this, I will like to conclude my present discussion. Thank you very much, Professor. So we heard two presentations and two discussions. While listening to the presentations, I am an economist and I'm not a social welfare major. And as a economist, while listening to the four presenters and discussants, I felt that they were discussing the care system in Korea. So I learned a lot. And to talk about my personal experience, in the past 5 years, my in-laws and my parents passed away, and I truly really felt the need of care for my parents and my in-laws. For all four of our parents, I saw them pass away at home, and there was care it provided in the household. Also, as a biological grandmother, I am participating in the child care too. In the field and in actual families, really, it's intense. One colleague of mine who has a child, and we at our Peninsula Population Institute, Korean Peninsula Population Institute for Future, I asked that colleague about the colleague told me about their child, and that child is in high school, and that high school student said that they don't want to have kids because their life was so intense, fierce competition, so they don't want their children to experience that. So as a person hearing this information, I feel very responsible. As the older generation, we really need to pull our wisdom together to address this. We have participants both online and offline. We have some received questions, but before we go on to those questions, I have a question, which is about care for children and care for the elderly. Care for the children, I wonder what research has been carried out to think about care from the parents and child's perspective, because we need to think about the satisfaction level of children. We are integrating daycare centers and kindergartens because it's in a dual system right now. We're trying to integrate this. This is leading to a lot of controversy. I don't know how long it's going to carry out, but there's a lot of objection about integrating this. I saw last week firsthand the protests taking place regarding such integration. So we should think about the satisfaction level of children. And the discussion did mention this. We need to think about sustainability. Care was provided at homes, and we are in the process of institutionalizing this and bearing this responsibility on a social level. But the transition is quite fast, so I am wondering if we have the budget for this to be sustainable. I hear that the budgetary loss right now is 59 trillion at the moment. And then now I want to go on to the questions that we received online. Diana Noon Alama from Ewha Women's University provided a question in English.
Your study produced 이거는 그 김인경 부장님.
So this is a question to In-kyung Kim.
Based on the data and information you analyze. In Korea, how does the cooperative relationship between researchers and the government, particularly with the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family? Policy recommendations related to the gender may sometimes conflict with interest of other sectors. What is your opinion on handling this common challenge? And how do you persuade stakeholders to consider and accommodate recommendations from your findings? 한국말로 번역해 드릴까요? 제 영어 발음이 안 좋았나 봐요. 어쨌든
So I will repeat the question in Korean. So first of all, how are you communicating and cooperating with the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family? And next, When there are recommendations that come out from your institutions, there might be conflicts with other sectors. How are you able to overcome those conflicts, and how do you persuade other stakeholders? And in your research, do you have any comments regarding this aspect? And then there was an anonymous question.
Well, this question goes to John Yong-ho, professor of Incheon International University, and this question also goes to Kim In-kyung. Care services. Family members, when they use care services, how can you accommodate their requests and needs when we provide care services? And when families need care services, what kind of approaches can be made to provide economic or financial support? And to what kind of education or training programs to empower care service workers? And for Professor Chon Yong-ho, for quality and security of care services, what kind of supervision can be given and what kind of criteria or standards can be established? And Professor Cho Ha-min also asked a similar question, and there are many questions, so we've just selected a few that sound very important. How can we recognize the importance of care services, and how can you expand the care service programs, and how can you promote collaboration or the program for collaboration between different stakeholders and different service providers, and how can we establish a supervisory programs for care services? So these are the major questions, and like our two speakers will entertain these questions.
First of all, Dr. Choi interpreted my presentation in such an eloquent way. Thank you for that. What I want to add is that in the area of care, as was mentioned, parents do not have the expertise compared to teachers, so the role of government is important. The government sets the quality standard, such as the number of children per teacher, and also they set the training for the teachers. They need to play the role of setting standards. Second, they need to support the financial budgets for such systems so that care and education can be provided to all children without any gaps. On the qualification, the government needs to set this up and operate this. And the qualification system, once this is prepared and once it's set up, it is important to compensate accordingly for people to pursue such careers. When setting up the qualifications, you need to understand the current status. You need to have smooth communication between the stakeholders to persuade them about the qualification requirements. There has to be smooth dialogue for us to see improvement in the childcare. In education and childcare, half of the effort is in communication and half of the effort is in thorough design. So in addition to design, there needs to be the process of persuasion. And I can't see clearly, but anyway, there was a question about the perspective of children and parents. As children grow, we try to enhance their happiness. We have that in our curriculum, and we're trying to provide daycare and kindergarten services accordingly. When I was studying in 2010 on this, there were teachers who had received training on child-centered care. We see that immersion of the children increased and their happiness increased. If we have more research like this, then the children, as they attend these institutions, can become happier and their non-cognitive capabilities will increase. And parents are nervous because they feel that once this phase passes, they can never go back in time. Once we have these researches accumulated, we can provide the evidence that children, if they grew through this education program, will be happy and be able to increase their non-cognitive capabilities. The second part of the question was on gender issues. I think that in the gender equality, just as the professor said from Purdue University, work and life balance, if that is only centered around mothers, then that is a factor that will exacerbate gender equality. Fathers need to participate in parenting. You know that there is positive effect because there are certain educational benefits that can only be provided by fathers. We should share this information with parents because parents, they want their children to grow well. In such cases, they will understand that not only mothers but fathers need to participate in parenting. If academic research on this is well advertised or promoted, more fathers will participate, and this will enhance gender equality. Give me a moment to organize my thoughts. Various care in community level, how should this be carried out? Municipal governments and the local ministries of education. There is a control tower, and the control tower can be by the Agency of Education. I think we should create a committee to work as a control tower to have organic connection and integration of these different services and support for capacity building of parents. In TV programs, I hope we see a lot of programs on enhancing parenting capability. But this is advice for parents with another child because children have different development phases and different situations and circumstances. So the programs that we see on television that cannot be blindly applied to your own child. Who knows their child the best? I think it's the teachers in daycare centers. During the drop off and pickup of the children, you can get information from those teachers, and then the parents can get advice about the role that parents should play. And I think the kindergarten and daycare center teachers can be very helpful. So we should open up these institutions, and we should enhance the capabilities and skills of our teachers. Thank you very much.
There are 2 points when it comes to elderly care. First one, how to ensure quality and safety of care services, and how can you provide a social safety net to ensure those two. In the long-term care services, local authorities provide supervisory services, and they also in charge of oversight. But public service workers, they are relocated to different job functions every 2 or 3 years, so the supervision is not going very well, and sometimes the transparency is not sufficiently provided to give enough supervision services to the long-term service providers. Then what kind of changes should be introduced? I think there should be some independent and dedicated oversight or supervisory agency, which will be also in charge of training care service workers. And right now, we just just give these duties to the private sector who are not qualified and sometimes are not verified. And because of that, most of the female care service workers, without having any job length or getting recognized for their job experiences, they just get the fixed rate salaries regardless of their work years. And so we need to have some system to improve and to improve the quality of these services and to empower these social service workers. Right now, the care service is primarily provided by the private entities, and because of that, they blindly follow the competition of the free market, and the market itself is very unstable because of the severe competition. So we need to make this as since this is a quasi market, we need to be more selective and provide a public support that only the qualified and the verified or a certified ones can enter the market to provide consistent and guaranteed services to elderly population while providing job security to the care service workers. And the second question was about how we increase the recognition across the communities about the importance of care service workers. How can you improve collaboration between different stakeholders? This is a very important question. So in care services, what is really important is to provide enabling environment so that senior citizens can spend the last stages of their lives at home and they can delay their hospitalization into the institutions. Under this objective, we need to have consistent policies. In that regard, there is a pilot program which has been 5 years old to provide integrated care services. Five local authorities, they integrate resources for formal and informal care service resources to provide seamless and consistent services. They recognize the need and they built a collaborative framework between private and public sectors so that they can provide more integrated and seamless care services to the elderly population. This should be replicated across the country. That is my thought. Yes, thank you so much for your inputs. And what about listening to some comments from our two panelists?
It was already mentioned by others. Korea's care was focused on reducing the financial burden for parents and the family. But this is not enough. Children, they should be able to be healthy and grow healthy. During COVID-19, children could not go outside, they could not exercise, and there were a lot of cognitive training that was focused. So we are seeing some problems with social and emotional issues of children. Non-cognitive capabilities are required. So we need to monitor whether the needed care is being provided, and we need to add on the child's perspective in assessing this. This is not in contrast with the parent's perspective. We need a child, a parent's perspective, and we need to talk about professionalism required by the teachers. I did mention this. And we have a child first principle in our child care and service. When raising children, I think the basic is eye contact and skinship. And we need to teach them to have a mental fitness and emotional abilities to control their emotions. And we need to invest in these areas through a lot of data. We need to reassess this matter.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make another comment. So you mentioned the community-based approach, but this is a national issue, international issue, and a regional issue as well. And I think this is a very global issue that can affect various countries because the labor supply should come beyond the national borders. There's childbirth, childcare, death. When we think about this, to provide care services, there is movement of people. And when we provide care services, this means people are living longer, and sometimes they are playing the role of consumers, and they remain economically active for longer period of time. And if we can replace the the roles of caregivers, then we can give more time for these people to be economically active, and this will create another momentum for economic growth. Therefore, we have to put this issue into perspectives and then have to try to solve these issues for economic development as well. Well, thank you so much for your inputs. After hearing your comments, I was thinking about what I have felt during my days that I took care of my parents and parents-in-laws. When I tried to find a caregiver, I had to interview them to find qualified, good person. But the process itself was very challenging. And even though there is some if there were guidelines from the government, it would have been much better for me. And since I am working at the Korean Peninsula Population Institute for Future, let me put this into the perspective of the demographic policies. I think now I've retired, and in just 10 years, I will be one of those people who are suffering from one of the chronic diseases who need care services. And up until now, our country was okay because we had more economically active population. But if the biggest demographic groups become the ones that need care services, the supply of labor would be in much bigger shortfall, and this labor shortage or the supply shortage should be studied in depth to come up with a response in time. So we talked about United in Care in the session 3. We have so much to talk about. The time is limited. I'm not sure whether we discussed all these points necessary to come up with a solution, but this is the future that will face us. Therefore, how we find a solution, how we develop the suitable program and response mechanism, the future of Korea will be different, and the, our future for gender equality will be also determined by our efforts for now to find a solution in care services. With this, I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of the audiences, panelists, and speakers. With this, I'd like to conclude session 3. Well, thank you so much. Lee In-shi, President of the Korea Peninsula Population Institute for Future. Thank you for your great emceeing and moderation. There have been many propositions to improve our care services, to respond to the needs of the aging society. The discussion itself was very insightful and gave us things to learn. We'd like to have a brief break time before having the closing session. If you have missed one of the former sessions, please bear with us until the end, because during closed session, we will mention key takeaways of each session. And if you listen to all of these sessions, this will be a very valuable time to look back on those sessions and then withdraw some important points to remember. So enjoy your break time, and we will see you in a few minutes. Thank you.